I have been watching and consuming Star Wars since I was born, and throughout that time, I've had a lot of questions, ones probably worthy of entire videos by themselves, but the most nagging question that I have every time I watch the original trilogy is just how on earth did the Empire build the Death Star? Yes, they have the numbers and certainly the power to own such a contraption, but this is not a matter of power, numbers, or even intelligence. No, this is a matter of physics. And just how exactly are a bunch of regular guys supposed to build a space station the size of a moon? So let's try to get to the bottom of this. How exactly was the Death Star built? And in order to answer this question, let's just figure out exactly what led up to the Death Star in the first place. Creating the Death Star was a messy and oddly collaborative series of events. You would think what happened was the Emperor rose to power, told his subordinates to build a mobile battle station, bing bang boom, Death Star. But this is Star Wars, so a bunch of other stuff happened instead. Around 23 to 22 BBY, and for anybody that's new to Star Wars lore, this is how time is told, either before or after the Battle of Yavin, which is the battle at the end of the first movie that led to the Death Star blowing up. BBY before, ABY after. Anyway, sometime between 23 and 22 BBY, Count Dooku went to the planet Geonosis and tapped a Geonosian Archduke, Poggle the Lesser, to make plans for a mobile space station. Geonosians are kind of known for their engineering skills. Poggle and a crew of other Geonosians created the plans as instructed. And this is where politics come into play. Geonosis at this point had just joined the Confederacy of Independent Systems, also known as the Separatist Alliance. They were openly pulling away from the Republic that held all the power. In fact, they pulled so far away that they were the ones who built the battle droids. So Palpatine, who was Chancellor at this time, had his hand firmly gripped around everything. He was not just playing every side, he was masterminding every side. So he uses Dooku, who no one knows is aligned with Palpatine, to get these plans made from the Geonosians, who have openly said that they do not support the Republic. But you know who really doesn't like the Separatists? The Republic. Needing to play both sides, Palpatine has no choice but to just sit back and watch an attack on Geonosis being made by the new clone army that the Republic has just acquired. This is the Battle of Geonosis, one of the most important battles in all of Star Wars because it marked the beginning of the Clone Wars. And during this battle, Count Dooku seized the plans and delivered them to Palpatine. Now let me tell you about the Strategic Advisory Cell. SAC is a small group within the Republic made up of Republic officials with the sole goal of fighting against the Confederacy of Independent Systems, Separatists. And further within that group is another group, the Republic Special Weapons Group. And this secret group within a secret group, as the name suggests, is responsible for all of the special weaponry used by the Republic. After Dooku took the Death Star plans from Geonosis and delivered them to Palpatine, Palpatine then gave them to the RSWG to start construction. So great, everything is in place now, right? Video over, that's how the Death Star was made. Of course there's more, it's Star Wars. So the Death Star, which was not called the Death Star just yet, it was just a mobile space station, but that doesn't really matter. Anyway, it was just in its infancy of being built. Then the Jedi fall.
Execute Order 66.
Palpatine takes control of everything and declares the start of his empire.
The Republic will be reorganized into the First Galactic Empire!
The SAC was disbanded, but the RSWG remained and renamed to the Imperial Military Department of Advanced Weapons Research, or like a million other names that are less of a mouthful. Alright, I'm about to throw a lot of dates at you, so buckle up. This happens in 19 BBY. The Death Star plans were created a little before the first battle of Geonosis, around 22 BBY, and that's when Dooku takes those plans and gives them to Palpatine. Then from 19 BBY to 15 BBY, the Death Star is under construction. It was at this point that the Empire hit a little snag. The plans clearly outline a laser powerful enough to destroy entire planets with one blast, but their planet-killing laser wasn't going to work. So they tracked down and coerced a scientist with expertise in kyber crystals, Galen Erso, hoping that they would provide the necessary energy to power their laser. The Death Star continued to be under construction for another 15 years, until 0 BBY, when Erso's daughter, Jyn Erso, stole those plans after finding out her father built in a flaw that would daisy chain into the destruction of the entire station. That then got into the hands of the Rebel Alliance, and, well... So that's how the idea and ultimate fate of the Death Star came about, but what about the question that I posed at the top of this video? How were the actual pieces of the Death Star assembled? Well, that question is a little trickier to answer. So here's my first plan. Look it up. Star Wars media is vast. Movies, comics, cartoons, games, books, my dreams. Surely, at some point throughout all of this, the act of building the most deadly and iconic weapon the Empire ever had would have been addressed. With all of this expanded media taking us into every depth and corner of the Star Wars universe, there actually isn't anything on how specifically the Death Star was built. So now I'm even more curious, but in order to proceed, we have to crunch some numbers. The Death Star is large. How large exactly? We're not really sure. The best I was able to find were conflicting sizes about the second Death Star, the one that was unfinished in Return of the Jedi. It's said to have a radius of 99 miles, 160 miles, and 560 miles. These numbers are kind of shocking to me. I mean, the biggest size here, 560 miles, is about the distance from LA to Phoenix. Which, I mean, yes, the US is a very big country, but that's still only about the distance between London and Scotland. So, all in all, the Death Star is way smaller than I ever imagined. Except, hold on math nerds, don't run to the comics just yet. I know that's not actually how this works. The radius is 560 miles, but radius is, well, not flat. It's a circle. So if you're going to metaphorically unroll the Death Star and put it on a flat plane, the distance would be closer to 3,500 miles, which is about the distance from LA to Hungary. So, phew. The Death Star is large. Unless we go with either of the other two sizes, in which case that means the Death Star is either not as big as California is long, or about the distance between LA and Salt Lake City. So our options are either unbelievably gigantic or disappointingly small. And considering two of our three options are disappointingly small, the Death Star is probably small. Not even coming close to a fraction the size of our own moon. And this thing is described as a small moon, which, yes, small is in there, but the fact that moon is how it's described makes me think it would take more than a half day to go around the entire thing. You could take two full trips around the Death Star, and it wouldn't even be tomorrow. What kind of moon is that? Alright, I gotta calm down. So now we have to ask the question again, how did the Empire build a space station the size of LA to Salt Lake? I guess it could have been built on a planet then launched into space, except we know the exact location the Death Star was built. In space, on the outer rim, orbiting a planet the Empire used for slaves, Despair, or Scarif. Kind of both, it's a little unclear. So again, how? Well, let's look at the construction of the Death Star 2. Maybe it'll give us some clues. Nope, we don't see anybody dangling from the outside, welding comedically large pieces of sheet metal together, but we do see some interior supports, or maybe it's scaffolding. Again, not sure. The bigger question of all this, though, is how do you think it started building this? Assuming it is a bunch of guys in spacesuits doing this by hand, where would you set your first piece? Just anywhere and let it float there in space? What if somebody lightly taps it when you're halfway through and it just floats off into nowhere? Okay, so I'm thinking it probably wasn't a bunch of guys in spacesuits with welding guns. It just doesn't seem very Star Wars-y, but maybe it was ships. The Empire has full-on armies of TIE fighters. Maybe they used a bunch of those to drag the pieces around in space and put them together. The TIE fighters would have to be modified with some way to join pieces of metal together and just move them at all. Maybe tow cables? Although that seems pretty imprecise and has a lot of room for error, and I don't think the Emperor would be so careless with what he believes is the very device that will secure the entire galaxy into his control forever. Could it be tractor beams? Maybe, although we don't really know how tractor beams work. Like, what is the range? Can they even work on non-electrical objects? What device is needed to achieve one? It's possible a TIE fighter is too small to put a tractor beam on. But, I mean, it doesn't have to be TIE fighters, they're a battleship. It could have been other ships that were used, except then we still have one big problem. Accidentally snagging fellow ships with your tractor beam, or grabbing more than one part, or grabbing part upside down, or just in the wrong orientation, period. The possibilities for failure with the tractor beam are far too many if one can even be used. So again, we're at stage 1. Now, for some reason, I cannot get the image of Darth Vader using the Force to place each piece one by one like the biggest Lego set in the galaxy out of my head. But somehow I doubt it. So, we have a big sphere that needs to be built in space without ships, tow cables, tractor beams, or just men floating out there. It is becoming increasingly likely that a device we have not yet seen in the Star Wars universe is responsible. But that is such an unsatisfying answer. I cannot let that be true. But I have tried again and again, over and over again, to figure out how specifically the pieces of the Death Star were put together. It is driving me mad. So before I end this video, I ask you viewers, please, in the comments, put in any tips, nuggets of information, or theories you have as to what on earth is happening here. Is there a device out there known for the construction of large objects, or a throwaway line that would help us solve this mystery? Or am I literally the only one who cares? Let me know in the comments. And while you're down there, like, subscribe. I'll see you in the next one, and may the Force be with you.